This is Swarfcast. I'm Noah Graff. I am very honored to be with Trevor Blondeel, founder of Operation Kickstart and host of the Mindfulness Manufacturing podcast. Welcome to the show, Trevor.
Thanks, Noah. I'm ready to go. Excited to be here.
I had the privilege of being on Trevor's podcast a month or two ago, and it's an excellent podcast. It's one of my favorite times being interviewed. And now, after really getting to know him, I had to put him on the other end. So let's get started. Give me a quick summary of Operation Kickstart.
Operations Kickstart, we work with manufacturers to connect the top to the shop floor. Noah, I ran manufacturing plants for 25 years and I made a lot of mistakes and a lot of battle scars and did a lot of actions well. And in 2016, I went off and started this to help solve the problem of disconnect. And often we have great owners of manufacturing plants and businesses that really enjoy their teams and want to do well, but they get disconnected. And that's the problem that we solve. And everyone has great intentions, but sometimes our intentions don't land with the perceptions of others.
Okay. Give me just a little bit. I'm really curious about the detail of, for 20 years, you managed factories. So you were the top dog, the executive, CEO?
More of the plant manager, like running the department. Yeah. So more running the operations. So I ran materials and then ran production and looked after hundreds of people in large manufacturing industries.
Hundreds of people. What manufacturing industries?
So we were in automotive, and we made frames and an assembly process. So big metal, 20-foot long pieces of manufacturing, and a lot of coordination, and for wonderful companies that really taught me a lot about culture and how to connect with people. Even though I have lots of good stories of where I went wrong and how I improved. And part of my goal is to help my former self accelerate their leadership skills and get more connected and help the whole manufacturing industry.
So, would you say as a plant manager you were a natural, or did you have a lot of really hard lessons?
I'd say that I had great intentions and a good person, and made great connections with people, and I had great success. And then when I look back, there were certain times where sometimes I would lead the way that people wanted me to lead, and I would kind of stray away maybe from my core values because I got focused on results, right? And I get focused on sometimes coming out of my own core values and how I showed up, because how we show up impacts on how people feel, and how we make people feel determines the extent they're going to engage with us. And when the pressure comes on, whether it's safety, quality, productivity, sometimes we'll default and feel that pressure and then put more pressure on others. And it's kind of the opposite of what we need when we're under stress. We don't need more stress, but sometimes that's what we do. And when I look back, there's times where I shifted my behavior based on my environment and the stress of what's going on, and I wasn't helpful. Fortunately, I have a lot of leaders that I worked with that are forgiving and still talk to me, most of them.
Very interesting. So what caused you to decide to pivot in your career? Was there one thing?
It was a combination, and it definitely was a lot of personal growth for me. I started reading more on emotional intelligence. I started doing mindfulness practice. I really started exploring and then heightening my own self-awareness and seeing that the way that I thought people saw me, wasn't always that way. And I started learning more. And I was blessed with some great training, some great mentors and coaches, which, just helped me identify just shifting a couple behaviors could make such an impact for others, because we have this effect on everyone, right? Like somebody can walk into the room and they can make you feel lighter, right? You have more hope. You have more of a vision that, okay, yes, there's good energy that's come in the room. And, it's like that first hour in manufacturing. If you start with a good vibe and you start with a green hour and everybody's organized and aligned, there's a better chance you're going to have a better production day. When you come in and your boss is, maybe not in a good mood, and then that kind of spins off to the rest of the group, and you come in hard, people don't respond to that all the time.
So was some of the influence for you wanting to make a change that the people above you didn't see as mindful enough? Because, I mean, you work with the top people, correct?
Well, yeah. So now I work with usually owners and general managers of manufacturing plants, and just helping, influencing where they want to get to. Because the ideal client for me and working is with someone with some level of self-awareness. Because people will say, "Oh, Trevor, you got to go over and help that plant. They're a hot mess."
So were you frustrated at how the top above you was handling things, and that kind of made you want to make a change?
No, I think I just reached a point where,
Okay.
you come to the same building every day and you can keep progressing in the organization, and we need leaders to do that. And, company had a great progression plan, and it could keep on running plants, but it's a blessing to be able to coach other leaders and see that transformation. And I just felt a calling that there was something just different for me. And most people aren't going to quit a job where you have probably, we just secured a 10-year contract when I resigned. And people are like, well, why are you resigning? Like, this is like, you got it made here, and it's great benefits, and you don't have a business plan set up. So, but hey, I just felt that, what, I have this calling, and I think I'll personally grow, and I'll be able to help others grow. And there's other plants that needed help and they didn't have the access. So there's a lot of plants that don't have a big corporate structure that has a great foundation of learning and training and development. And I really thought, okay, so this is the interesting part. I thought that these other manufacturing plants needed more structure. They needed the quality systems, right? Because some of these smaller plants didn't have like the lean systems and the 5S and the continuous improvement. I thought, that's the problem. I need to go help these plants.
So you thought you were going to consult people on that?
Yeah, I really thought that, there's plants like, get quality rate the first time, and workplace organization and 5S. Because I'd go into some other plants that would make us parts and kind of give them some feedback. And I kind of realized, hey, there's a business here where I can go and help these other plants. And so some of my first projects were more tactical, I would call it. And then when I got into it, it's like, well, there's someone in that building that knows as much as I do about 5S.
Yes.
But they're not implementing it. So
right.
That really wasn't the value that I could bring to the table. I'm like, okay, so what is it? Why don't they have a great 5S program if there's somebody in there that understands the concepts? So they had the technical knowledge, but they couldn't connect it. And often we as the senior leaders get in the way.
Very interesting. So give me a few more examples of problems you're trying to solve in the workplace.
So one of the clients that we're actually putting together a white paper. We're going to publish a white paper on coaching and emotional intelligence in manufacturing, and that should come out at the end of this year. And it's a case study of a plant that we worked with. And there was a project, a capital project of creating some automation and some manual processes in this plant. And they brought me in to kind of help with lean a little bit there. And this is where I started to get some of my aha moments. And the owner brought me in, and a wonderful owner, and he knew he needed help. And this is where you need to be at. Like, if you know you need some help, you're ahead of the game. right? Because you have that self-awareness saying that, hey, I know I'm a good owner. I know I'm a good leader, but I think I could be a little bit better. And when we got in there, we brought in some training around 5S, but really there was some disconnect among the leadership group. And there was what I learned right away. It's kind of like when they started to make decisions and try to do improvements. Well, we got to check with the owner first. We got to we got to go back and check because he might undo this, or just different conversations, right? So there was that disconnect. So really, it was having some conversations, around the culture, and super great people, great intentions. Like there wasn't bad leaders; they just weren't connected. And so it's really having that deeper level of dialogue of like what's driving that behavior and understanding that, and having, I like to call it in manufacturing, less monologues, more dialogues, right? We like to tell people what to do, but we don't want to talk that much about it. Trevor, I just want to tell them what they need to do. Why do I not need to do anything else more? Well, how's it working for you?
Okay. So mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Yeah. It's got some different meanings. When people say mindfulness, I think of meditation. I want you to get into, a little bit of analysis of what mindfulness is. What's the standard definition? How do you see it? And then I want to know what the process is like. So first, give me the general definition of mindfulness, and then tell me how you use it and what the heck it is.
Well, you have a lot of manufacturing followers, so I can speak best in that language. And I like to have it as where your 2 feet are, where you're planted right now, whether you're listening to this or you stop and you think about this during the day, is your mind where your 2 feet are, right? So where are you present in what you're doing right now? Because often we have 10 different tasks on our mind, and we're jumping from task to task, or from conversation to conversation, because we have a lot we need to get done. And for me, mindfulness is taking that breath, realizing that right now I'm talking to Noah. I'm not checking my phone. I'm just focused on listening to what you're saying, and really getting your mind in a mode that, and this is where the practice comes in, where I'm not thinking about what I want to say next. I'm actually just taking in what you're saying. And to me, in manufacturing, and that's why we started the podcast, is because we need more mindfulness in manufacturing.
So your specific, a lot of what you're talking about is listening.
Yeah, listening and being mindful of your own behaviors as well. So it's a combination. So it's not just listening.
Right. So you're not self-absorbed.
Yeah. It's kind of like, okay, like sometimes we may be in a situation, and I've done this before. This is still mindfulness, saying, Noah, I know you want to explain this to me right now, and it's important to you, but to be honest, I've got another issue across the plant here. And I can't concentrate right now. Could I come back later and we can pick up this discussion? Like I could come back in a couple hours, because to be honest with you right now, I'm just not present, because I've got to address this first. Would that be okay with you?
So that's one of the things you might coach somebody to do, to like step back, understand what's going on, and then explain it to others, articulate it to others.
Yeah, like just kind of catch that yourself in the moment of. So another good one is that always cracks me up, and I haven't seen it too much lately, but it's like you're typing something on your computer and someone walks in to talk to you, and you can say, go ahead. I'm listening. I'm just going to finish typing this. Okay. So that is the opposite of mindfulness, right? So that's like just not being totally present. I'm going to half listen to you.
Where you're trying to multitask, which is impossible according to scientists.
Yeah. You can switch task, but you can't multitask. You can't totally be focused on 2 different things. So it's just that really of you know what, if you're going to be talking to me, somebody said that about it was about Bill Clinton. It was there was a quote around there, and they said, well, what was he known for? And there was some people had written about that, is that if you met him, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room.
I've heard that.
Okay,
Yes.
so that is, and when I heard that, I'm like, man, if that was said, if someone said that about me, I'd feel pretty good. And I know I don't do that all the time. So, but if I could do it a little bit more, you know, that's what it's about. It's not going to making it perfect. It's just saying, hey, I'm going to be a little bit more mindful about this. And if someone comes and talks to me, I'm going to make sure that I've got their full attention.
So is part of what you're doing. So part of what you're doing is making people more mindful of what's going on around them, what's going on within themselves. And then is another aspect of what you do just kind of giving them like social conventions and tricks of social psychology of how people might react to things and things they can do to, you know, I think like, for instance, what you said about somebody's being pestered and they have a lot of stuff going on. I think it's beyond just knowing, just being mindful of the stuff you're going on. I think you have to teach them, okay, this is how you could talk to somebody for them to respond. That's something that you also do, isn't it?
Yeah, because you'll hear me say that
So it's some
mantra.
practical advice in addition to, I mean, mindfulness is also practical advice, but it sounds like sometimes that's a lot of what somebody needs to know. Like, oh, people don't like when you say that.
Mm,
Oh, eureka. That's happened to me. You,
absolutely.
yeah, that's really interesting because that makes sense as a coach because you're, I mean, you're coaching about a lot of things for people to succeed.
And it's a good point, Noah, because at times you just don't know. So maybe you're aware of it, but you don't know what you should be doing different. And there was times in my career where it's kind of like, you know what, it doesn't feel great that I just gonna put the pressure on this maintenance tech on afternoons. And if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. And you know, I could start to have that area of like, that's probably not the help that this person needed. And I probably, instead of, you know, putting the pressure because on an individual, saying, what do you need? Like, what's going on? And if we can ask more questions and give less direction, we're going to move our industry in a much higher level.
So this reminds me, this was just like, I'm not going to say an epiphany, but this was like a huge thing that happened to me. So probably, I don't know, 12 years ago, I was dating somebody and, you know, I thought she was great, but she wasn't the easiest person to be with. Um, and I was, she was telling me about something with her job, and I was, I wanted to give some advice.
Oh,
And, well, so it's a combination of the woman saying, I don't want advice. I just want you to say, you hear me. But the bigger thing was that I said, well, I think you should do this. And she goes, oh, you brought out the shoulds. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just trying to be nice and help you. And she's like, you never say should. And I don't know if she said you should never say should, or she just said should is like, it's like a dirty word. And I was like, whoa, like it blew me away because I just thought I was just being a caring boyfriend. And then after that, I was like, okay, I'm not never gonna try never to say I should do that. You should do that. Um, And it makes total sense because people feel like you're judging them. So I bet you
Mm.
that's something that you instruct people on, the should rule.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone down that's a great example, and we can learn so much.
Because it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't mindful of, her pain and me needing to help her. I was mindful. I just didn't know about the social convention of the whole thing. Like, oh, you just don't say that. That's verboten.
And that may just not have been the right time for her, and that's part of it, is just realizing that. But it's just that awareness of, it doesn't matter what our intentions are. What matters is how it lands with the other person.
True. Let's talk a little bit. Let's go back to the shop a bit. Millennials, they're big, it's a huge part of the workforce now. How is this stuff that you coach people with extra important for working with millennials? They're more sensitive to understanding why things are being done, correct?
Well, I have a 23-year-old son, and I've
Is that
learned.
millennial or is that Zoomer?
Well, all I know is that he has a unique perspective that I learn from. And whether it's millennial or whatever label we want to have on it, every generation is a little bit different. And that it's actually what manufacturing needs. Because the workforce, we want to bring in younger people. We need younger people, especially in the trades. And they're going to be more curious, and they're going to challenge a little bit more, right? It's not going to be they come to work and I'm getting paid a good dollar, so I'm just going to be quiet. So there's a greater need to add value.
It's a different expectation than, say, the baby boomers who were content with, putting your head down, working hard, and, being a good worker. It's there's a different expectation now, correct?
Yeah. For me, it's gonna push more of what we need. It's gonna require us to have more dialogue back and forth, and it's gonna be less direction and more conversation, right? Of understanding, like, what's the bigger picture here? And when your whole team understands, and they're not just coming in and they're not just loading parts, they understand the bigger picture. They understand how they connect to the vision, and they understand how their value is connected to what we do for this plant and this community. You don't have to motivate people. You don't have to push anybody, because they're connected and they're driven. So this is, to me, it's kind of like, this is going to help the industry, because it's going to push us more to have deeper conversations and explain things more. And then guess what? We're going to learn more, and we're going to be better from it, and people are going to progress faster. We need it. I always call the operator as our subject matter expert. And no matter what your role is in the organization, we all add value, and it's, we just have different roles, and we all need the same information.
But you specifically focus on the top dog versus middle management, or, say, people in the trenches, or, I mean, sometimes the owner is down, getting oily in the machine, but there would be a place to coach other people in the shop as well, correct? But you believe more in the sort of trickle down aspect of it. Well,
my experience has shown, and because I've had people call me and they say, hey, I just need some help in this plant because our supervisors aren't really getting the team members engaged. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do coaching with supervisors, 100%. So let me ask you, how's it going? Who's coaching the supervisors? Who's responsible to develop them? Well, the managers are, but we're good. We're just busy, and we just need you to come in and help, help develop them.
But then there's a disconnect.
Right. So it's kind of like, well, hold on a minute. I understand you're busy, but where's your skill level at coaching and developing the team? Because I've made the error of coming in and thinking that I could come in the middle and make that difference. The challenge is if your leadership who gives you direction is not on board and they don't want to really get better at this. They just want the supervisor to get, so we don't have to deal with this. Well, it's not going to sustain because the behavior is going to kind of go back to what your leader is pushing, your values of your company. So my most important aspect of making sure I work with the top is that they're demonstrating the behaviors. And if I can come in and help accelerate that in a plant, then that's where the fun begins, right? Because they're showing that, hey, I may run this plant, but I've got behaviors that I got to get better too. So I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not doing because we all have areas to improve.
It must be really hard sometimes if the owner just doesn't have respect, and it hasn't had respect for a long time because, whether it's something they really do wrong or just a way they're perceived. You, I suppose, have methods for them to not only become mindful, not only learn how to speak to people, but you have methods to try to get people's respect from the people. It's so hard it's really hard, to change how people perceive you.
Yeah. And the only way that changes is you build trust with consistency in how you show up and vulnerability, right? And showing a little bit. So you can be in a tougher situation, but it's amazing when you go to your team and you say, hey, I know that I've been blowing up in some of these meetings and I know that I've probably said some comments that I really wasn't proud of later on. And it's something that I want to get better at. When you do that, it's amazing how forgiving people are. And if you say, I know I'm the head honcho around here, but I need a little bit of help from y'all. And it's amazing how people will rally around and help when you really are genuine about wanting a little bit of help.
That's true. That is totally true.
It just cracks me up. It's got, no, I'm good. No, nope. I don't have any, this is my sure sign. No, when I meet someone and I say, hey, what are you working on? Like, what are you trying to get better at? I'm like, I'm pretty good. No, I've been doing this leadership for a long time. I got this down. It's those guys over there that need some help.
So what do you say? What's the first thing you say to that person? Of course, that person is going to consult you, right? So they probably are owning up to something being needed to work on, correct?
Well, it depends. If I'm working with that person, so for example, I've been brought in before to coach someone, and they really don't see that they have an area to improve on. Well, then I don't have permission to work with them, and it's not going to work. It's like, nice to meet you. There's really no value for me to add in this relationship.
Right. So I could see that happening where you have some people on management and they're just desperate. And so they refer somebody to you, but that just can't work because unless the person owns it, unless they have some skin in the game, they're not going to work. I do coaching too. I have a podcast coach and I have a life coach. You have to pay for that stuff. You have to volunteer yourself.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you're not accountable. What do you do? Have you had coaches?
Oh, absolutely. I
or do you now?
So I'm in a mastermind of other coaches. So we actually and we're all successful in our business and we still do practice coaching. So we will, once a month religiously. And so someone observes and then one person coaches, one person's a coachee, because we just know that we want to keep on the top of our game all the time. And if you're never being observed, like you need that, right? And then when I get, like right now, I'm taking some training on professional speaking. I speak to manufacturing organizations, and I'm a good speaker, but I can be better, and I need some coaching. And I just know that, hey, I see other speakers, and it's like, wow, that speaker's great, the way they told that story, and so I'm in a program right now getting coached.
Right. What is what's one of the most challenging clients you've ever had?
Well, I think it's probably.
And the next question I'm going to ask you is, what's one of the greatest successes you've ever had as a coach in this business? So I don't know if you want to combine that. I don't know. Very likely not, because the most challenging person could be, what's the most challenging client you've had that was a great success?
Well, I think like every situation is a challenge in itself, because when you're working on changing behavior, it's hard. And then there's just going to be those certain moments that are like almost truth telling, right? It's difficult to hear that your baby's ugly, right? When you do a survey on a plant and it's not all accolades, and that there's people that are frustrated, and there's a couple, there's an ownership group that I was coaching from it wasn't manufacturing, but it was a trades company, private ownership, and their owners. And yeah, we did some surveys on them, and it was some family ownership, and some difficulties just among the relationship among the family owners, and then the connections with the people. And it gets emotional because you got a lot of pride. Your name's on the company, and you know that there's a disconnect, and when you start realizing that you're the problem, that's really hard. That gets really emotional.
Absolutely.
To the point where it's hard to control, because no one wants to not be liked.
So can you think of a specific one, or are you just kind of blending it together?
I mean, that's
brain?
one that I'm actually kind of thinking through in my mind right now, right? And that was really hard, right? So that took some individual conversations, that took some conversations, amongst the family and the ownership, of having some hard conversations of where they're differing and how they're not helping each other. So it's really kind of like coaching, and I did some dialogue of, between the two family members of the ownership, of like each of them kind of getting to talk of like, what are you doing that's making it harder for me? And what could I do better? So I don't impact you in a negative manner. Right. And kind of like being able to just go a little deeper into that. Like, when you call me out in a meeting in front of our staff, and you say it like this way, it really makes me feel demeaned, right? Disrespected in front of the team. So, maybe next time, if you could just pull me off to the side after, and how about you and I have a one-on-one? And then they even got to a point where they said, okay, so I'm going to make this hand signal if you're doing it. And that means stop. And then we'll talk after. Right. So, that's, and that's really hard, because it's like, especially when you're family, you care about each other. But at the same time, there's conflict.
Lots of conflict. So when you're doing with a family, will you have several members of the family see you? Either separate or together.
Yeah, and we did both. Absolutely, no. Because it's good to kind of like unpack, like, because you get your own personal survey. So we do like a 360 report. And what we try to do, like, we'll have some of their team members fill it out, their peers, some of their office staff, each other. And what we do is, in a survey like that, we're not trying to figure out, okay, what's all the behaviors that no one needs to work on? Because we know it's just like a project task. If you got 10 projects, you're going to get nothing done. So what we want to do is, what's the one behavior that's common, that if I just worked on how I manage my time, right? The feedback I'm getting is that I'm late to meetings, that I don't make commitments, and this is really causing a lot of disruption in the company. So if I could just manage my time better, and then for somebody else, it might be just showing appreciation.
And you have strategies. You're armed with strategies for these things.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and then we just kind of talk that through, and it's kind of like, okay, so what's going on with your time? So, and I'll just ask questions, and it's not, kind of like what you said earlier. So it's not me saying, hey, you should do this, because we know that that doesn't work. But I'll ask questions like, so when you do manage your time, what works well? And if I think of the one individual, like he was having a hard time keeping up with processing these quotes that only he could do. And it's like, okay, so when's the best time to do it? And okay, so what could you communicate to everybody else? And what ended up happening through the coaching, he said, well, I'm going to go to everybody and tell them between 10 and 12, I'm going to close my door. Unless it's an emergency, I'm going to focus on doing these quotes. And just, he went and asked them for help, right? And they were frustrated because he wasn't getting the quotes done on time. So they were glad to help.
Interesting.
So that's just an example, and just an example of a strategy.
Give me a few of your favorite podcast guests. Let's give people a little taste of what you do.
Well, I definitely say Ryan Forte, and he was the owner of the fabrication plant at Jefferson Metal Products in Windsor, Ontario, and that's probably and that is who we're writing the white paper on. So that
okay.
was
So what happened in that?
So that's where he did not realize the impact that he was having on the rest of his organization. In particular, he had a general manager that was running the plant, and he was not enjoying his job because he didn't feel like he was adding a lot of value, because a lot of his decisions sometimes got overridden, and they were sometimes maybe both focused on the same project and not really having that deeper conversation. And today they work together. Fantastic, great relationship. And I should probably get both of them together on the podcast now. Because they went from being divided and frustrated, but fortunately they were both open. This is the difference. They were both open to feedback. They both knew that each other cared, and there was a respect level for both of them. But there was just a lot of frustration of, hey, if I do this, Vince was a plant manager. If I do this, Brian might override it. But Ryan didn't see that he was doing that, right? He wasn't doing it intentionally. But as we had more dialogue, and the plant was able to ask
so
what
it was
they
mindfulness,
needed.
and it was also just hearing it from the other person, so they could understand what the other person was thinking.
Yeah, and the survey that we did with Ryan was so people, he couldn't tell who said what, or like it's anonymous through the survey, but you get to see some general themes on how do people see him, and he was able to pick up some themes on what could I do a little bit differently to allow the team to feel more valued. And sometimes that means just stepping back a little bit, letting your people do what they were hired to do. And you care and you just want to help, right? So you want to jump in there. But sometimes the hardest thing to do is to step back and just let the team go.
Absolutely. Well, that I'm very big into serendipity.
Mm-hmm.
Today, actually, I put out my first sort of blog, short form podcast about serendipity. I want to know, for you, what you think of any specific serendipitous thing that happened in your life that just sticks out. Or it doesn't have to be like this dramatic thing that changed your life. It could just be, I don't know, something that happened the other day.
Yeah, and you had a great podcast coming on with me, Noah, and I believe in the whole universe, right? And there are moments in life, they call it equanimity, of like not getting too excited and not getting too upset. and everything kind of happens for a reason. Whether maybe it's a job that I didn't get, maybe it's a job that I did get, and I wouldn't have been able to get this job if I didn't have the other one. And I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
when I take the
So give me one example that just comes to mind. I just want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so I was definitely, last year I was really, really trusting that I was going to get a couple jobs with a couple major contracts with a couple of these plants, right? And I was working with the ownership group and the management group, and I didn't get either of them, and I was disappointed, a little emotional, and it was like, man, and what happens, right? Just people get busy, and different leadership comes in, and for whatever reason, they didn't work out. And then I got a call from a recruiter looking for a leadership coach with manufacturing background, and but they were looking for 30 hours a month. And if I would have won those contracts, I couldn't have committed to 30 hours of coaching. And come to find out that it's just a great manufacturing company.
That's fantastic.
That I'm having a joy, because they're not trying to fire anybody. They're just actually trying to grow some of their leaders. So it's a great company, and I'm learning some of their practices that I can share with other manufacturing clients as well, and on how they improve their safety, quality, and productivity. Because I believe that we're all in this together as a manufacturing community. We got to share it and learn from each other.
That is a great example. Great. What's something recently that you learned, or a book or podcast, something you listened to that really struck you, either emotionally or just you thought it was just really interesting?
Well, the last book I read was The Psychology of Money.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, and one of the quotes in there.
Who's that by?
I'll tell you one second. But yeah, one of the quotes in there was, it's not going to be a quote. It's going to be what I took out of it.
Okay.
And that your happiness is a measurement of your expectations minus your success. And it made me reflect. If your success starts to rise, and then your expectations rises at the same rate, then you're never going to truly be happy, because you're always chasing it. So like if you're, and so when it comes to spending, like what do you really need to spend on versus what makes you feel at peace, like with how much debt you have, and where and how in your mindset around money and spending. And it was Morgan Housel is who wrote it. And he wrote it just after the pandemic, or just during it. I think it was when it was starting. But really, the people that were really successful with their finances, and when they pass away, it's not the tycoons and the savvy entrepreneurs. It's the average person, the teacher, the janitor, the person that lived a happy life, and they didn't live outside their means, and they found happiness in the moment. And I got divorced in 2016 after 18 years of marriage.
Oh, so right when you became a coach.
Yeah, right on the same time. Exactly. And that was a lot of learning for me in that time period. And I remember, I would build a deck, and we put in a pool, and then we put in a gazebo. And I always thought
this was before you got divorced or after?
This is all before. So okay. This is kind of really wanting to make my marriage work, right? Because I didn't want that failure. I didn't want to be divorced. And I thought, well, if we just have this, then we'll be happy. And it was always crazy. And then, so I made a little bit more money, and we had a bigger bonus, then we could go on another vacation, and that's going to make us happier. Right. And then that expectations just kept on rising. So, I actually published a book report on it, because I think it's something that we can relate to everything in our work life and our personal life. And it does tie into mindfulness, right? Like being grateful for just what we have, and and just that whole stress of, do we really need to spend this, or can we find joy in where we're at?
Yeah. No, that's so how did they gauge people's happiness exactly?
So basically, like, if you're, it's a mindset, right? It's a mindfulness saying that, I could say that, I'm doing some public speaking, but this other speaker is on bigger stages than I'm on, right? They have a bigger following. I could say that
Trevor's got more listeners than
yeah,
Swarfcast.
yeah, exactly. I could say, well, Noah's had his out longer, or Making Chips is the #1 podcast, so I should, I'm not as happy with mine, and I got to get my listens up. And it's kind of like, or I could say, you know what, I'm just really proud that I've kept it going, that I've added value, that I've gotten some feedback, and it's just my perspective, and I'm not comparing to someone else, and I can just be at peace in knowing that I know it's better than it was when I started it. And that's really kind of the whole, because if it's always measuring that, well, man, I really hope by this time of the year that I was going to have this many listeners. Well, that's not going to drive happiness.
So it sounds like what you're saying a lot of is that it's about comparison too. That's a big factor. Like, I know they've done these psychology tests where, they've asked people like, would you rather be making $100,000 while everybody around you is making 80,000, or would you rather be making $120,000 while everybody was making $140,000? And I think often it's the people prefer the one where they're making more than everybody.
But there's so many great stories of just different positions, different people, and it's kind of like, oh, like. There was a speaker that I talked to recently, and they told a story of a woman that was cleaning the bathrooms in an airport, and she was just singing, and she's just has life in her job, and just she's happy. That's where true. She's at. And it's kind of like, well, how can you be so happy cleaning bathrooms? It's kind of like, because I bring a smile to people every day, and sometimes they walk in here and they're not smiling. When they leave, they are smiling.
Right. Well, there's the thing. It's the calling, the purpose, when you said you had a calling, I listened to this other podcast the other day. It was about positive psychology. I'll send you it. The guy said, there's 3 things you can have. You can have a job, which is where you go and you collect a paycheck. You can have a career where you're trying to go up in the ranks and make it to the top. And then you can have a calling, which is where you are doing something which is beyond yourself. It's helping other people. It's having an effect on more than just you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really felt when I heard that story.
And so when you said you had a calling, I went, bingo. Like, you've got this glow when you're talking about what you do. And that's happiness.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I'm blessed to, and privileged to be able to serve and work with these leaders in manufacturing. And I really like, manufacturing has one of the lowest engagement rates and one of the highest pay rates.
What do you mean by engagement rates?
So Gallup did some studies, as they do, and looked at just different industries. And I think, the average engagement rate was, I may have to go back and correct this in the show notes if I'm not 100% accurate here, but it was around 35%.
But what does that mean?
That means that when they do a survey they did a survey of tens of thousands of people, and because that's what they do. Great company. They do a lot of my data comes from their company. Shout out to them. And then they publish these reports, these workplace reports. And so they just survey people, on a scale, how engaged are you in your work? Like, how much, do you enjoy working there? And, how passionate are you? And, do you enjoy your job? And they'll ask different questions, collect that data, and then they'll come out with some percentages of, they did a lot of good studies that you can go to their website and during the pandemic and after the pandemic and then working from home. And yeah, it's really fascinating. The data.
And so you're saying they've got high wages, but people aren't calling it a calling.
No, they're if they look at the different industries and how excited people are about, like, thank goodness I'm working, it doesn't matter what the pay is, I'd be just working in manufacturing. But a lot of times we're calling people because, hey, it's a good, trades get paid really well in manufacturing and there's some good benefits and you can be secure for life, financially. And a lot of that is true. But I believe we can have both. We can create an environment where we can connect to people and we all have value. And if we want to be more competitive, it's not about hiring more people or more robots. It's about the people you have in your four walls today are the best people you could have, because they're there today and they're there for you. So what are we doing to engage the ones that we have today and be curious about what they're thinking and what's going to make their day better? And if we do that, they're going to be more engaged. Like, let's fix what's bugging you, not what we have on our big capital project list.
Right. And that's your calling. That's really what your end thing you're going for.
Let's connect. Like, let's have some conversation because we're in this together.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like an awesome place to finish. I really appreciate this, Trevor. Trevor, why don't you tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, or see your podcast or whatever? Yeah.
Thanks for I got a great episode with Noah on mindfulness manufacturing on serendipity you could pick up.
Going to run it on this podcast too. So
wonderful, and just different people, from the industry we interview on there. Sometimes it's just experts, and sometimes it's experts in the industry, and then sometimes it's just people that authors of books and different influencers that I get to ask questions and kind of figure out how can we be more mindful in manufacturing. It's pretty tight in that conversation. And then operationskickstart.com, I've got a newsletter and I'm on LinkedIn, and I love to meet people. So connect with me and love to have a conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Noah.